And now, from beyond our dimension, this is the JeffMara podcast. Here's Jeff.
My guest is Dr. Michael Salla, pioneer researcher who's uncovered hidden truths about UFOs, extraterrestrial federations, and humanity's cosmic destiny. Tonight, Dr. Salla's insights could reshape your understanding of the universe and your place within it. Dr. Salla, thanks for joining me and welcome.
Thanks, Jeff. I appreciate being on your show again.
Well, it's great having you, Doc. And I want to start with your background. And that is, how did you go from an academic world into exopolitics?
Yeah, very interesting journey there. I was a specialist in international conflict. I mean, that was the field that I was working in. And I was particularly interested in, what is it that drives international conflict? What is it that makes it so intractable, so difficult to resolve? And so I was looking for answers for what are the kind of hidden dynamics behind international conflict. And so I kind of stumbled on Dr. Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project press conference in May of 2001. And at the time, my official position was assistant professor in the School of International Service at American University. And I listened to it. They had 21 witnesses come up and talk about a cover-up of UFOs, extraterrestrial life, and of ancient technologies. And I listened to that, and I listened to all of the whistleblowers very closely. And because I've done so much work in the field of international conflict, where I would go to places like East Timor, Sri Lanka, Kosovo, Macedonia, where there are these ongoing conflicts, and I interviewed people, you develop a good sense for who's telling the truth and who's just kind of like telling a tall story. And these guys were telling the truth. I mean, that's what I kind of felt right away, that they were very sincere in what they were revealing. And I thought, well, this explains a lot. I mean, they were basically saying that behind the conventional world of geopolitics and representative governments and militaries, that there's this deeper layer, which is all about these extraterrestrial technologies that are being found all over the planet and are being secretly studied and reverse engineered, all being done off the books with different government agencies providing funding and kind of like just keeping this whole thing away from the world public. And so that to me was directly relevant to what I was doing, because for, what is it that drives international conflict? And well, if you have a deeper layer like this, where, I'll give you an example. People think that the Iraq War, the first Iraq War in 2003, was all about oil, was all about controlling the oil reserves, and that's why you had the Bush administration going in. Or maybe you say, well, it was all about Iraq being sympathetic to international terrorists, whatever kind of like conventional explanation you want to come up with. Well, what if the truth was that Iraq is an ancient civilization? Well, it is the territory where there was once an ancient civilization called Sumer, and in that Sumerian civilization, they worked directly with these advanced off-world beings, extraterrestrials, and they developed technologies. Some of these technologies are kind of like space-time portals, and that a lot of these cuneiform texts describe how to use these space-time portals. Well, here you have Iraq under Saddam Hussein threatening to share all this with the Russians and the Chinese, And the Americans said, well, no, we're going to take control of all of this and stop all of that. So it kind of gives you a different way of understanding what is it that's really driving international conflict.
If you step back and look at the big picture, is it the ETs that are basically controlling the entire planet?
I would say yes, that the ETs have been in control for a long, long time. And they do that through ruling bloodline families that for if you go back far enough in antiquity, and it actually describes this in the book of Genesis. It actually describes the arrival of the fallen angels and how they interbred with humans, with the daughters of Adam, to create something called the Nephilim. And the Nephilim were essentially giants, men of renown, and they became the rulers of the planet. And that ever since that time, if you look at the divine right of kings, if you look at where does that doctrine come from? Well, all the kings that believe that they exercise this divine right will trace their heritage all the way back to some of these demigods, the Nephilim, and even further back than that. And so that's where we get, these bloodline ruling families that secretly are pulling the strings of a lot of elected governments and of the major corporations and the militaries around the world, and that they are connected in some way with extraterrestrials, either through genealogy or through occult practices such as summoning uh, extraterrestrials. And this is where you get into the whole, like SRA and summoning demons, because some of these extraterrestrials, like there's a group called the reptilians, and the reptilians, their names are pretty complex. And if you utter the name of a reptilian being exactly as it's supposed to be pronounced, that being will appear before you. So, so this is where you get the whole kind of like summoning of demons, that these ruling bloodline families associate themselves with different extraterrestrials, and when they utter their names, especially in occult rituals, then not only are they able to summon these extraterrestrials, but these extraterrestrials will kind of like relay some power to them or help them in whatever kind of like conquest plans they have, or taking control of a country or of a region. And so yeah, that's been going on for a long time. And so yeah, the extraterrestrials rule humanity not up front where they can be seen, but secretly through these ruling bloodline families that are either connected to them through genealogy or through occult practices.
The way I'm interpreting what you're saying is that it sounds like their end game or their rule is malevolent. They're not really here to uplift us into some new reality or new earth. Would that be correct?
Not all extraterrestrials are malevolent. I mean, I think the majority, from what I've been able to gather from my years of research and interviewing different contactees, is that majority of extraterrestrials are actually benevolent. They want to help. But the malevolent ones, they're the ones that are kind of like in control, because they're pretty ruthless and they tend to work with ruling bloodline families who are psychopaths and sociopaths. And I think it's important to distinguish between the two. Like the psychopaths, these are the people without any real empathy or regard for fellow humans, and they tend to be the ones that rise to the apex of these ruling bloodline families, and the whole kind of like SRA practices that's designed to remove all empathy. And so the ones that actually are in control, they're psychopaths, and they work with kind of like-minded extraterrestrials who are also psychopathic, and they tend to be these reptilians. They are described as like often 7 foot, 8 foot tall, really massive beings. The Draco reptilians in particular are described as fearsome warriors. So if you summon a being like that, then this is someone that's going to kind of like uh, put the fear into a lot of people, and they're the ones that over the course of the millennia have exercised a lot of control through these ruling bloodline families who tend to kind of like have a lot of psychopaths that are in the top positions. And then you have the benevolent extraterrestrials who work with creative individuals to kind of like inspire humanity in positive directions. So, for example, you might have a benevolent extraterrestrial influencing people like Michelangelo or Leonardo da Vinci and inspiring them to put out ideas to start the Renaissance, to start this age of openness and free thinking inquiry. Whereas the Draco reptilians, I mean, they might inspire someone to like launch crusades against other faiths like the Muslims, or to launch an inquisition against people who deviate from the right thought. So you have this throughout human history, like you have these conflicting tendencies where there's powerful people that say, yes, we must go on a holy crusade, or we must launch the Holy Inquisition. And then you have others that are champions of uh, free ideas and uh, or helping humanity learn about its full potential through things like understanding ancient history, like the Renaissance and so forth. And this is how the conflict has played out. I mean, William Bramley, and we mentioned him in the pre-interview. I mean, his book, The Gods of Eden, described this in meticulous detail, that this is the way human history has evolved. It's been because of these conflicts. On the one hand, you have those that tend to be, say, more malevolent, that want to monopolize power and kind of like control the rest of humanity. Whereas on the other side, you got those that are more open-minded, freedom-loving, and wanting to encourage human creativity. And that conflict has been running for millennia, and even today we have the same forces operating, positive and negative extraterrestrials. But it seems that we are in a new phase in this ancient conflict, because according to what a lot of people are saying, that the benevolent forces are about to change the world in a really fundamental way, because the secrecy is about to be lifted.
Do you think that the benevolent and the malevolent ETs are having a war off planet?
I think that that has happened, but that somehow the Earth has become like a microcosm of this bigger conflict, and it's like this is where all the different ET factions have kind of like seeded their genetics and have kind of like been intervening over the millennia to try and encourage the Earth and the population to go in a particular direction. And so I think in a way, it's almost like the extraterrestrials decided among themselves that, look, let's not fight each other openly because it'll just lead to great destruction. But let's let's kind of like send our genetics and our people to this planet Earth, and we'll kind of like use that as the microcosm for fighting things out and resolving things that way. So it would kind of make sense that in terms of evolved galactic community, that you would fight your conflicts not directly. I mean, that's something that can happen, but you would encourage uh, conflicts being resolved in a way like a football game, but rather than a football game, you have a planet like Earth where all the different ET actors see their genetics, their technologies, their know-how, their history, and you kind of like fight it all out there.
Have you had contact personally?
The way I began in 2001, it was because of this Disclosure Project press conference that I heard and I immediately knew was real. Uh, but over the years since, I've had experiences. I have seen some UFOs. I've had some vivid dreams, which I'm not sure that these are just dreams, that they could be memories. But there was one particular incident I remember in 1985 when I was only 24 at the time, and I had just broken up in a relationship. So I was feeling emotionally devastated at a very low point. And I remember these three blue-white beings appearing in my room and then communicating to me that they were family. Now, I was confused at the time because I thought, well, you're not my family. I know my brother and my sisters. You're not them. How can you be my family? But they just radiated this peace and this love, and I just felt better. Uh, I didn't know what they were at the time. It was, as I said, I was just in an emotional state of mind, and so I didn't know who these beings were. But now, given everything that I've experienced or learned about, I would say that these were my star family. These were uh, the beings that in a prior life were my colleagues, my family, and that prior to incarnating on Earth, uh, they said that they would look out for me. And I think that is how I would see that as being something reflecting of me being a starseed.
Do you think that your star family is assisting you with your podcast in any way?
Totally. I believe that my star family have been helping me from the very beginning, guiding me to different sources of information, to different people, looking out for me, protecting me. Often I would be struggling with questions, seeking answers, and then lo and behold, the answer's there in the morning or something after a sleep.
You have a book series, right, about secret space programs?
Yeah, I've got a couple of series, but one is on the secret space program, and that's 7 volumes.
Wow. Well, what are some of the key revelations from them, and how has everything evolved up to now?
Right. Well, it has been the secret space programs is probably the best kept secret on the planet, and people are skeptical, say, well, the military and the government can't keep secrets. Well, they've kept this secret very, very well. And what's happened is that um, the 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 US has developed a secret space program with the help of German scientists who immigrated to the US under Operation Paperclip. And And so in the 1950s and the 1960s, with the help of the German scientists who were familiar with an earlier German program that dates back to the 1930s. So the Americans by the 1940s and 50s were playing catch up to what the Germans had already achieved in their secret space programs. So in the 1950s, agreements were reached, and that's when you had a lot of the Operation Paperclip scientists coming over from Germany and helping the US space program take off. And it's a matter of history that the Apollo program was run by former Nazis. I mean, that's history. I mean, Werner von Braun, Kurt Du Bois, they were in charge of key elements of the Apollo program. But what was really happening behind the scenes is, as far as the public is concerned, the Apollo program was all about building these giant Saturn V rockets that would get Americans to the moon, and there'd be some landings, and they'd bring back some moon rocks, and that would set the foundation for a future space program. In fact, the truth was that the Apollo program was a massive cover-up. It was a sideshow. What was really happening was that billions of dollars were being funneled to these Germans who were building a secret space program using anti-gravity technologies, torsion field physics, and that was in the 1950s. So the Germans, they were using that to build craft that would get them to Mars and the outer planets, while Americans were getting to the moon in these Saturn V rockets. And so that was what was going on in the 1960s. By the 1970s, you have the US Navy finally developing their own fleets of anti-gravity craft. Some of these were massive ships, like cigar-shaped craft that would go out into space using anti-gravity and torsion field physics for their propulsion systems. And so that's when you had the birth of the American space program called Solar Warden. And of course, the Russians were doing something similar. The Chinese are furiously playing catch up, trying to steal every bit of technology they can to catch up. And deals have been made. Technology has been shared. The Americans and the Russians have been collaborating, even though they're competitors, but they've also been collaborating. And to a certain extent, the same thing happens with China, that they also, the US and the Russians are trying to get them to bring in their expertise to collaborate, but there's also competition there. But yeah, there's multiple secret space programs, and they're all out there in space doing different things, finding ancient technologies that can kind of like help develop a kind of like faster and better, more efficient kind of like space program. And that's where things have been for a while now, as far as the technologies are concerned. And then you have the personnel. And this is where things get really tricky, is that the personnel that are recruited for these space programs, it's done on a different basis to like normal military recruitment, where someone signs up for 4 years, 6 years, or whatever, and they go out there and they serve, and then they come back, sign a non-disclosure agreement. They don't say anything. It's done differently. While some of the recruitment happens that way, it appears that a lot of the recruitment relies on people signing up for these 20-year programs. So they agree to serve for 20 years. And then at the end of that 20-year service, advanced technology is used to mind wipe them so that they don't remember anything. and then they are sent back in time to when they signed up, and essentially they kind of like almost like they wake up, but they've got 20 years of suppressed memories in their consciousness. So a lot of them suffer PTSD, and they go through life not knowing what's going on, and then eventually they might start to remember what really happened. But they actually did serve for 20 years on a program, on one of these secret space programs. So it's really quite sophisticated, but there's a lot of whistleblowers, a lot of people who have come forward talking about being part of these 20 and back programs.
It makes me wonder, where did they come up with this arbitrary number of 20 years? Any idea?
I think my guess is that it has something to do with the rotation of Jupiter, that it takes Jupiter approximately 20 years to do one rotation. But as I recall, it's Jupiter that maybe takes that long to do a rotation, and that somehow that would be the ideal time frame for people to be recruited and then having their memories wiped and being sent back.
I've interviewed quite a few people who were part of the SSP, as I'm sure you have, and some of the guests have different explanations on how it works. You just mentioned time travel, but I think I've had at least one other guest, if not more, say that they're pulling their consciousness out of their body and perhaps putting it in a different body, and then maybe time traveling just their consciousness only. Have you put it all together, and how does it work in your opinion?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question. Initially, I thought it was done where they would physically regress the body 20 years at the end of the 20-year program. But then I started to find that more and more whistleblowers or insiders were saying that their consciousness was taken and borrowed for 20 years. And so that was another theory. Now, I interviewed someone called William Tompkins, who was a former Navy spy, worked with some of the major aerospace corporations that were involved in secret space programs. And he says that they developed a cocktail of pharmaceuticals that would literally age regress a person. And so so people could be age regressed from 20 years or something, that they worked out what the cocktail would be to regress people. So you could regress them, you could send them back in time, and if you mind wipe them, then it's like they just start off again, and they live the 20 years again, but with no memory of the 20 years they had spent. Now, the other model, and this is I've come across this as well as you have, clearly, that the consciousness is borrowed, that it's just taken out, that the body and the consciousness are separated. The consciousness is transferred into a clone, and the clone goes out there and does all this stuff on Mars, or working with the Dark Fleet that people describe being in a serving with the Solar Warden or with the Dark Fleet and so forth, and they're out there doing that for 20 years, and then their service period is up, and the consciousness is just sent back to the original body, um, and because consciousness um, is kind of like easier to manipulate than say a physical body, um, they can do this pretty easily. So yeah, so it seems that there's two ways of doing it now. Exactly which one is more accurate, I'm not sure, because I've heard people describe both, and I've heard that they do have these age regression technologies, a pharmaceutical cocktail that's used to regress people that would make it possible to, to take them back in time to when they began. But the consciousness transfer is also very plausible as well. So I really can't give a definitive answer.
I recently had a guest from China that only spoke Chinese. It was me, him, and his interpreter. And he claims to have been abducted and taken to a planet where their commerce is that they copy beings from around the galaxy. And not only can they copy your body, I guess they can download your consciousness and put that in your body too. So essentially they're making a complete copy of you. And he sat there and had a conversation with himself.
Okay, well, cloning, I mean, people have talked about cloning for some time, and that some of the secret space program insiders say that their original body was cloned and that their consciousness was transferred into the clone, and that there are multiple clones there in case they get killed.
Right.
Because apparently, if you do get killed out there or severely injured, they can just transfer your consciousness into another clone body. Now, I'm kind of like pretty certain that if the body's not killed, then the consciousness can be transferred to a clone without any great difficulty. I think that if the person is killed, then they can be lost. But I'm not sure if the consciousness would go back to the original body, because I mean, if a clone gets killed, what happens to the consciousness? I'm really not sure I can answer that, but it sounds as though this Chinese whistleblower maybe was more familiar with that process.
How did the Germans get all this tech? Did they happen to stumble across some UFOs that were crashed? Or did it evolve naturally through their science?
Well, it happened in the 1920s for the Germans through the Vril Society, and they had these psychics that made contact with a group of extraterrestrials from the Aldebaran system, and the extraterrestrials communicated in ancient Sumerian and relayed the technical information for building a space-time device. And when the channel of Maria Orsic is cited as being the original psychic in the Vril Society that started it all and received the original transmissions from the Aldebarans, she showed that the communications to a German expert in the Sumerian language, and he was able to interpret it as a technical manual. And then there were scientists in Germany at the time that tried to assemble it. And one of those scientists was Schumann, W.O. Schumann. He was a professor at the Electrophysical University in Munich. And so he was funded to build this technical device that Maria Orsic had channeled. And they spent a few years working on that and eventually built some prototypes. And so by the early 1930s, the Vril Society, being funded by other German secret societies like the Thule Society, were making some big breakthroughs in this kind of advanced exotic propulsion systems and the craft that would use those. And then Hitler came on the scene, or the Nazis actually rose to power. They captured power, and they just took it all in. They took all that information that had been gained from the Vril Society over the course of the previous decade, took it all in, and they decided to put it under the control of the Nazi SS and to weaponize it. And so that's how it began. And then another group of extraterrestrials came onto the scene, and these were the reptilians, because the Aldebaran ETs, like Maria Orsic and her group, were kind of more pacifist leaning, that they wanted to use this information for scientific exploration and purposes. But the Nazis were more interested in weaponizing it all. And so this other group, the reptilians, came in and said, well, we'll help you weaponize all of this. And so that's how it all began for the Germans. But definitely it dates back to the early 1920s.
Do you agree that contact is increasing, or at least we're having the ability to capture it more often? And if so, do you think something big is coming soon? Some kind of big UFO event?
I think contact is happening much more frequently now. There's a lot more people that are aware or open-minded about the whole extraterrestrial scene. People have phones that they now kind of like regularly use to take photos of the sky. And so you have a lot of photos, a lot of videos of UFOs. And so people's attention is being kind of pulled up more and more to what's happening in the skies. And of course, you have a lot more newspaper reports in the United States. Things have turned around where now you actually have the US Congress seriously investigating the UFO issue, whereas if you go back a decade, Congress wouldn't have anything to do with it. That any congressman that talked about UFOs, their career was at stake. Now you have a UFO caucus in Congress. You have members of Congress who are dedicated to finding the truth about this. And so they've been holding annual hearings, sometimes 2 hearings in a year. You also have a body created in the Pentagon called the All Domain Anomaly Resolution Office, which is supposedly tracking UFO reports from all over the US, especially those that pertain to the military. And so all of this has kind of created this momentum where the UFO issue is just growing exponentially. And so there's just a lot more interest and reports that are coming out, and the photos and the videos, they're just kind of like all over the place on YouTube and TikTok and Facebook. You can find them all over the place. Now, I think that this is going to create a major event in the near future, which will be some kind of a disclosure event, or an event where the existence of extraterrestrial life is not going to be a secret anymore. It's probably it can be something that is planned, where, say, the white hats, the people that want society to reveal the truth, or they want to reveal the truth to society because they figure that this is going to be the best for the evolution of humanity. And then you have the extraterrestrials themselves, who look at our world and they look at it in terms of, okay, well, you've got the people who are informed, they want to know about us. The people who are in control and in power and run governments and militaries, they tend to be more secretive and want to monopolize power. But when we look at the collective consciousness of humanity, what we get is that humans want the truth. And so this is where the extraterrestrials will kind of like talk to the governments or talk to the militaries and say, hey, you guys, you need to reveal what's going on, because if you don't, we're going to do it. And this is how much time you have. And I think we're kind of like pretty much at that period now where time's up. The white hats have to reveal it, because if they don't, the ETs will, and it'll be better for the white hats to reveal it on their terms and in a way that they can control the narrative. Because if the ETs do it, then the kind of the military and governmental white hats will lose will lose a lot of credibility and power. But of course, then you have, on the other hand, you have this kind of deep state, which is trying to keep everything secret and trying to sabotage things. And so that's what's been delaying it all this time. But I think we are headed for a major event soon.
How soon?
Well, I look at things that are happening now with this Trump administration, because it does seem that America is the epicenter for disclosure. Why that is the case, there's many reasons why that's the case. America still is a superpower, and the biggest military, if not the biggest economy, the second biggest economy. Culturally, they have still enormous power. So if you look at all of the major indexes for what makes a country influential, the US is at the top or second in all of those major indexes. And I think this is where disclosure is happening. And I've already mentioned the role of the Congress, and the interest of mainstream media in this is pretty strong. And so right now, you have many whistleblowers, many insiders coming forward. This is not something that you can see in other countries. In my country, Australia, it's very rare for a whistleblower. I mean, I've spoken to people who know some of this stuff, but they're very scared to talk about it, because the punishment over there is much more, well, yeah, it's pretty disciplined and pretty severe. And if you break the secrecy, because for smaller countries, they need to show the bigger countries that, yeah, they can keep the secret, they can keep their people in line and disciplined and so forth. So they won't tolerate whistleblowers. But for the biggest actor on the scene, which is the United States, there's a lot of tolerance for whistleblowers, and that's because certain military services encourage it. So you'll have, for example, the Navy has a history of encouraging its people to speak out on UFOs, on the possibility of extraterrestrial life. I mean, Stephen Greer, I mean, he organized a like hundreds of whistleblowers to come forward, because in 1997 it became clear to the people running major um, military services that the deep state was covering up so much, so that they kind of like encourage their people to come forward to become whistleblowers. So yeah, I think the big event will probably happen before the end of this first 2 years of the Trump administration. I say that because um, if it doesn't happen before November 2026, that's when you're going to have a new set of elections in the United States. And it's very rare for a presidential administration to retain both houses of government during a midterm election. So it's very likely that during the next election cycle, you might have House of Representatives switching back over to the Democrats if the status quo remains. But if they reveal everything, what's been going on, and how the deep state infiltrated and took over governments, especially the Democratic Party, then I think there'll be a political advantage in doing it before the next cycle. So I think there's a kind of solid political reason for why it's going to happen before November 2026. But right now we got this, we have this three-eye atlas, which is coming in, which has got a lot of attention, and you've got it approaching perihelion now with Mars. I think it's around October 4th. It'll be close to Mars. And then October 29, it'll be in perihelion with the Earth, and we'll be able to see it. So and a lot of the reports I've been getting is that this is a spacecraft. This is not a comet. And even some conventional scientists are saying it's a spacecraft. So if it is a spacecraft, and because so many eyes are focused on it, I think that there's a very likely chance that it'll change direction and even do other things like slow down, or possibly even split apart, and you might have parts of it landing on Mars or even heading towards Earth. So there are so many different scenarios that could happen. So this is going to be over the next couple of months. And I suspect Three Eye Atlas may well be the harbinger of kind of like extraterrestrial disclosure.
I knew that next week they should be able to take pictures of it from the Mars probes or whatever they got up there. But I didn't realize that when it comes close to the Earth, we can see it from Earth. Like we can go outside and look up and see it like a comet.
Well, October 29 is when the Earth and Three Eye Atlas will be in closest proximity, but I think it's 1.8 AU, so it's quite a distance. But yeah, there'll be line of sight, and people with telescopes will be able to see it. I don't know if during the day you'll be able to see it, as kind of like, because I know there have been famous comets like Halley's Comet that you could see it during the day. That I don't know, but I think if Three Eye Atlas is going to be something that really makes humanity aware that extraterrestrial life exists out there, it'll be because it does something extraordinary, like change direction or split apart in a way where a part of it might land on Mars, for example, as it gets close. In fact, JP, I think we mentioned JP earlier, former US Army serviceman. I mean, he says he just got an update from one of his extraterrestrial contacts that Three Eye Atlas is associated with this flotilla of returning Martians. That Martians who have been in other solar systems for millennia are returning to our solar system, and there's a possibility that they'll just land on Mars, and that this is that Three Eye Atlas is kind of giving them cover for landing on Mars, or that part of their flotilla or their fleet will land on Mars, and another part will journey on and come to Earth and go into the oceans to join their sister colonists under the oceans, and that'll be something that is quite an amazing possibility if that did happen. If all of a sudden you had these spacecraft arriving going deep into the oceans, and it's just like, the whole planet would all of a sudden be in a crisis. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Why are they here? And who's going to explain it?
Do you remember how people used to talk about Planet X and the Anunnaki? Do you think it's possible that Three Eye Atlas could be Planet X?
Well, Planet X, as it was originally being proposed, and I think it was people taking Zecharia Sitchin's work and interpreting it as like, well, Planet X is about to arrive. But Sitchin never said that. He said, as far as his calculations were concerned, that Planet X would arrive, I can't remember the exact date, but 2060 or something like that. But there were others that talked about it, and there was this channeler, Nancy Lyder, who was saying that Planet X was coming back, and so yeah, there are other sources. I think Mark Hazelwood, another author, that was kind of like putting out that information. But at the end of the day, it just didn't turn out. It wasn't accurate information, and I think it was because uh, they took liberties with interpreting what Zecharia Sitchin had to say. But Planet X is supposedly the kind of, according to the Sitchin information, it's the home world of the of the Anunnaki, and that it takes 3,600 years to do a complete cycle, and that its next cycle would be kind of like in the middle of this century, rather than at the beginning, which is what a lot of these people were putting out. So I don't think Three Eye Atlas is Planet X, because we're talking about something that's the size of a very large comet, as opposed to a planetoid or even a red dwarf planet that could create havoc, which is how Sitchin interpreted it.
What are your thoughts on the cosmic agency material?
Yeah, cosmic agency, that is a very interesting channel. I mean, it first began releasing messages, communications from these Taygetan extraterrestrials in 2018. Swaru was the first Taygetan that Gosha, who's this Polish UFO researcher, and her Spanish colleague, Robert, they established communications with this Swaru, who apparently was on a small Pleiadian Taygetan ship that docked itself on this Andromedan mothership in the vicinity of Earth, and just connected with our internet, and would communicate through the internet through say a chat group with these researchers. So the researchers would ask a question, and they would get an answer from this Swaru. Now, is it feasible that extraterrestrials are communicating with humans using the internet? I think that that's totally feasible. Why wouldn't they do that? In fact, I know of cases from the 1960s where ham radio was used as a form of communication. Uh, so I think that this communication was very, very plausible. So from my research into the cosmic agency material, it's very credible. I mean, it's original material. I have interviewed Gosha once, and I have met her in the past, around the time when the Swaru material originated, and she struck me as a very sincere and dedicated UFO researcher. And as I looked at the cosmic agency material, I just found more and more of the information being kind of like this very original, very perceptive into how the Earth is currently being run, on the one hand, by these military white hats who are collaborating with the Galactic Federation. And the dynamics of that collaboration are very interesting in terms of how the cosmic agency material describes it, essentially suggesting that currently the Earth is under the control of this Galactic Federation, but that they are kind of like slow walking the disclosure process, that they're really not taking it very fast, because humanity is still locked into a kind of third density consciousness where it's all about conflict, and we need to learn how to control our violent impulses, because most of the galaxy operates in fifth density, where people can more easily kind of manifest their thoughts and their intentions. And so if we're going to join fifth density society, we need to evolve ourselves or develop ourselves so that we are not manifesting nightmares, but that we are manifesting beautiful things. And so right now we are kind of locked in, and that the Galactic Federation is in control of the situation, and that they have something called the Prime Directive, which interestingly was it it contains 10 principles, and it was Gosha's version that that came out in 2018, that was later reappropriated and released by another prominent contactee as the Prime Directive, without acknowledging the cosmic agency material. And I thought that was pretty egregious, because this later contactee was kind of like saying cosmic agency was this information, but why would you take information from cosmic agency, repackage it and put it out yourself and say this is the real Prime Directive, if cosmic agency was disinformation?
What are the key differences between the Galactic Federation of Worlds and the Confederation of Planets? And why might one be more reliable for humanity's spiritual evolution?
I think it's very important that we acknowledge that there are multiple extraterrestrial organizations out there that are interacting with humanity. And one of them is organized in a more kind of militaristic way, or where you have a military hierarchy and so forth. And that is the Galactic Federation of Worlds. And similarly, you might say the Ashtar Command also has a military hierarchy. And their chief goal is to like combat negative extraterrestrial groups that are influencing events on Earth or in our solar system or elsewhere in the galaxy. And so they tend to be, as organizations, more likely to respond in a overt military way against the aggressions or the injustices of the negative extraterrestrials, whether we're talking about the Draco reptilians or the Orion Greys or the praying mantids. That these are hierarchical organizations, or these are the Federation is a kind of militarily hierarchical organization that has the means to respond in like kind to any kind of aggressions by these other groups. Now, there is also another organization, the Confederation of Planets, which is much more spiritually inclined, that they largely disavow the use of military means. I mean, they are capable of it, but it's very rare for them to use military means in fighting against the activities of negative extraterrestrials. The Confederation of Planets is more about raising consciousness. Uh, their philosophy is that to a certain extent, we manifest our own conflicts. And in order to deal with those conflicts, you got to rise above them. You got to develop a different way of thinking and behaving, and so they will emphasize more the kind of the spiritual transformations that we have to make so that we do not attract into our lives conflictual personalities, whether at an individual or at a collective level, or nor manifest kind of like disease and so forth, which comes about from us kind of like projecting outward the problems that we may that we may be experiencing in terms of like putting the blame on others outside. So yeah, the Confederation of Planets tends to be more reflective, more spiritual, contemplative, emphasizing different ways of looking at conflicts, and that they operate more in this kind of fifth and sixth density realm, whereas the Galactic Federation operates more at the third, fourth, and fifth density.
Has the Galactic Federation been infiltrated and or compromised by AI?
That's a very controversial issue. I think that AI has been identified as a problem in all organizations that use artificial intelligence. Now, as far as the Galactic Federation of Worlds is concerned, there have been a few people that are part of this Galactic Envoy program. And the Galactic Envoy program is where starseeds from other worlds volunteer to join the Galactic Federation, and they do it typically as couples or as groups. So one member will remain as part of the Galactic Federation or the Ashtar Command, and another member would incarnate on Earth. And so that kind of like creates a very interesting dynamic where members of the Galactic Federation not only beholden to their military leaders, but they are also deeply connected with some individual starseeds who are their partners who have incarnated on Earth. And so what's happened is that the Galactic Federation has made deals, kind of like similarly to what Gosha described in terms of like the Galactic Federation kind of like essentially runs the matrix system on the planet Earth until such time as humanity evolves out of 3D and into 4D or 5D. And so there was this perception by several of the Galactic Envoys that the Galactic Federation leadership were dragging their feet on disclosure, that as far as the Galactic Federation leadership was concerned, the greatest threat was the Draconians and the Orion Greys, and that once they were removed from the scene, then everything was set for kind of like having the white hats or the Earth Alliance joined the Galactic Federation as partners, and to like build fleets of craft that would actually go out there and do the things that the Federation would like to do. But that the kind of like human suffering on the planet would continue, that there would be this continuation of the current status quo where a lot of these advanced technologies haven't yet been released, and that people would still be in places of poverty and poor health, and people would be not able to use kind of like technologies to be able to travel around quickly, that we'd still be, say, dependent on fossil fuels and so forth. And so this is where the whole idea came up that the Galactic Federation leadership was compromised, because, why else would they make these deals that would allow the human condition where suffering and poverty and disease are still major challenges for the population, when the advanced technologies exist to take us out of all of that, kind of like at the sweep of a hat sort of thing. And so that's where I think people have been saying that the Federation has been compromised in making these deals, and not having this kind of technology revealed as soon as possible.
Looking forward, what do you predict for humanity's integration into the galactic society?
Well, what's happened is that there already has been an integration of humanity into galactic society. On the one hand, you got the Germans and the Dark Fleet, and they've recruited millions of people into their programs, and they've been interacting with other civilizations and really uh, putting forward the worst possible persona of humanity. I mean, we're talking about former Nazis that think in those lines, that think in terms of a superiority of races, and that might is right, and that many of them are kind of psychopaths. Then you got our secret space programs, like the Americans and the Russians, and now the Chinese are developing their program, and they're operating in space as well, and they're out there, and they are kind of like more reflective of our human values, but still, these are led by hierarchical structures. I mean, this is where you'll have like the US Navy in charge of the Solar Warden program, and you'll have the Russian Navy in charge of their equivalent, and the Chinese the same. But these are all military run, and so they reflect the military thinking, military values, and so that's out there as well. That's already out there. We, the bulk of humanity that are kind of like kept out of the loop, we are the ones, we're the free thinkers, the philosophers, the creators, the ones that operate selflessly, and we're kept in the dark, and so we have very little influence out there. And the positive ETs, especially the Confederation of Planets, know this. And I think this is one of the reasons why they want disclosure to happen, because without it, these kind of more humane qualities that we reflect, especially those of us in the alternative media, like yourself, myself, we have nothing to do with the military. We have nothing to do with major corporations. We essentially like to listen to people and share communications and share our values. We have these. We promote empathic ties, and this is what's not happening out there. It's that people like us who want the best of humanity to flourish and share and grow, that we are not reflected yet out there. And I think this is what the more evolved extraterrestrials want, is that they want this information to come out so that we become empowered. So it's not just these psychopaths that are part of the German Dark Fleet out there working with reptilians that are kind of like representing humanity, nor is it the military hierarchical values of the kind of like the Solar Warden program and the Russian and Chinese versions. What we want is kind of like the values of civil society, which make up 99% of normal society. If you think about it, in the United States, I think there's what 330 million people, and about say there are 2 million that are associated with the US military. That's it. So it's kind of like it's less than 1%. So 99% of humanity that shares these kinds of values, we're not really represented out there, and that's what has to change, and that's what I would like, the rest of my life to contribute to changing, to make humanity's presence in space more reflective of how we are in any country where you have civil society, which is 99% of the population. We're generating all the wealth. We are the ones that fund the military, and the military hoard it all, keep the secrets, go out there and do their thing according to their own values. And we need to make the military more responsive to us and our values. And that's going to be quite a journey, but it has to be done.
Well, if people want to check out your YouTube channel, is it just under your name, Michael Salla, or something else?
Yeah, they just go to Michael Salla, youtube.com/Michael Salla, and they'll get my YouTube channel. And yeah, I publish 3 times a week, a video, whether it's an interview or it's a week in review. But I do maintain that consistency of 3 new videos a week.
Where can they go learn about your books?
Best place is to just go to my website, exopolitics.org. That's exopolitics.org. And all my books are there. Or you can go to Amazon and just do a search under my name, Michael Salla, and the books will all be there.
Michael, before we finish up, can you leave us with a last positive message?
We have the capacity to change things in a way that is far beyond what we would think. And that, I think, comes from us being able to connect with these positive extraterrestrial beings, and also to connect with our own heart center, our higher self, because it's not going to be through the ego mind that we are going to achieve any kind of equality with these benevolent extraterrestrials that are out there. It's because we're going to connect with this heart center, with the higher self, which really is equal to the extraterrestrials. And once we make that connection, we can really influence things. So I would say anyone who doesn't yet have some kind of spiritual practice, and it doesn't mean following a particular religion. I'm not a believer in any organized religion at all. I don't follow any. But whether it's meditation, whether it's spending time in nature, just spending time in silence, but anything that helps you connect with your higher self, with your true source, that is going to make a big, big difference. So I want to thank you, Jeff, for having me on the show and all these fascinating questions. I appreciate it.
Michael, thank you for your message and for being my guest. Thanks for watching the JeffMara podcast. I really appreciate you. Another way to show support is through YouTube memberships. And if you do, there are loyalty badges and other perks depending on your level of membership. All you need to do is click the join button underneath the video to find out more. Thank you for your support.